Right. Once the group kind of went its way, where did Shawn J. Period find himself?
We all still stayed in Brooklyn at Mario's family's house. I think that, and you interview Mario. Like, I speak for myself. Definitely went through a little depression. And not to the point of like clinical where I having to take medicine, but just right looking back on it, where it's like, because like my pastor says, disappointment is not based upon what you find; it's based upon what you expected to find. And a lot of times that expectation
Hmm.
can deeply root that. It's like, well, we gonna be a star. We come in here, and then the disappointment of all the different things that happen. But I found myself like, once that happened, the production side really kept me going, because it was like I still just I was on fire for just wanting to just do just more beats and stuff. And the other guy, Mayor and Jeremy, they were still doing this stuff, but Mayor was naturally in fashion, right? So it's interesting how he everyone went to their corners, the things that I think that they were naturally inclined to. Jeremy was into sports, so he ended up becoming a sports agent sometime later and stuff like that. So, but in the process of the group, even amongst ourselves, we there was infighting amongst ourselves, and I had kind of split off from them, even though we living in the same house and stuff. Just different people getting in our ears, and just um kind of pitting us against each other, and whatever. And then also probably just young and not understanding the frustration of what just happened, and you know all of that stuff like that. And but from there it birthed me as a producer. So my first let's say paid thing was with Vinia Mojica, right? So she
Hmm.
was with the Daylight folks or whatever. I'm not sure how I even met her, but met her, and she had a deal with Warner Brothers. But the deal didn't the record didn't even come out. It was just working and stuff, but that was like my first official one. But then, because I had the relationships with Big Beat and Reef, who was the A&R at the time, the A&R then, the artifact I'm sorry, Mad Skills got signed to the label. Now, we didn't know Mad Skills from Virginia, but he was coming up through the similar circles with Stretch and Bob and all this stuff. Q-Tip was supporting him and stuff like that. So I just submitted as a producer. I submitted, and he ended up picking 3 songs. So that really is what, like the Vino Mojica thing, got me going. Okay, I'm doing some stuff, but the Mad Skills 3 songs is what changed the game, because I was like, I mean, I had just gotten my approved to work at the post office. My dad was a postal worker, so it was like, boy, you got to get a job. You're in New York, you can't keep sending money and supporting you, and and he's right, right. But and I literally was about to go within like I had already gotten approved, and let's say I think it was like a week or two I was supposed to start, and Reef said, "Your math skills want to pick these 3 songs." So you're talking about, at the time, you getting like maybe 3,000 a song or something like that. Music, it's harder to get. The current stuff is different, right? But
Right.
you have budgets and stuff like that, and he and I remember, so you get half up front, so that's 4,500. So no, what was it? 9,000. Yeah, 4,500. And man, I am not working at the post office.
Right.
Forget that, right? But I thought to myself the other day, man, because I saw an older picture of myself from my high school, and had they asked that question when you go out on the you listen to talks and stuff like that, say, what advice would you give your younger self, right? And I literally yesterday I was looking at this picture of my high school picture, graduation picture, and I'm like, man, and I see the baby face and just no hair and just all this stuff. And I'm like, bro, if I could have given you some advice, man, it would have been different financially. Like we definitely do fine, right? But it's like, it just would have been different, man. But you have to live your life. You don't know. Your mind is not right in certain ways, right? So, I just think that it was, looking back, it was all a good experience, but it wasn't necessarily, you know, easy, right? But the
Right.
production thing really helped me to just stay, because I just love doing it. and it ended up growing from there.
Did you and Matt Skills have a relationship from Virginia earlier on?
No, no, I didn't know him at all. Like, but because I think that at least got me in the room. Like, obviously, Reef was his A&R now, right? And but I think that at least got the look from him, right? Like, I felt like production wise, I felt he picked some stuff, that was good, but it at least was like, oh, this guy's from Virginia, Richmond. Let me check it out, right? So
Right,
it just opened the door enough for him to like at least hear it, right?
right,
And
right.
then from there, but that album was fascinating because that was the first, from my understanding, it's the first track production for Jay Dilla as well on that album.
So now you have a lengthy discography, and I won't keep you here all night, but I just want
Mhm.
to kind of go over some highlights, and you just take me back to what you remember and
Okay.
how those placements came about. You mentioned Artifacts on their sophomore album. How did you link with them on That's Them?
Well, it was through the label, right? Through because they had their first album come out while we were still label mates. So we met them just through being on the label and stuff like that. I didn't do anything on the first album, but then when it came time, T Ray wasn't doing as much on the second album, and I just kept. I was determined. I was like, okay, I'm an independent producer now. Got mad skills. Got but really it was like them after mad skills, right? And I was like, I want to work with them. Like I always loved what they were doing, the diversity between the two of them, right? And we bonded, you know what I mean? Like the Newark guys, man, between L and Tame and Chaos and all the guys that they would bring to the studio, Polo Ice and all these guys, it just was like I love those guys, man. Something about the Newark guys, man, that just, I just resonated with not just the artifacts, but their crew. So I was like, you know what? I want to work, man. So I just kept sending, doing songs, just doing it, doing it, doing it, and eventually it got to the point where I'd submitted so many times that end up getting like about half of that album, that's them album, stuff like that. But that's just purely focus and just like, hey, man, I want to be with you, man. I'm focused, and focus oftentimes gets you. It definitely at least gets you closer. It doesn't necessarily get you the work, but it'll get you closer.
Right. The Bush Babies on Gravity.
Bush Babies met Khalil through our road manager, Joey. She was working at this company called Tavern and Thea. It was like a business agent, business manager for like Tribe and De La, I don't know if De La was there, but Tribe and Bush Babies, different things. And she introduced me to Khalil's or Mr. Man. And then from there we just start, you know, sharing like he wanted to learn the SP 1200 drum machine, so I was like, oh, we give him some tips, and we go back and forth, back and forth. And then they were starting to work on that album. I heard their album because the Remember We and all this stuff like that. We used to see it on the box on cable, television stuff. Um, and then with that album, because we were just sharing information as producers. Like I didn't start out to do that. I was just I met him and like, hey, we're working together. I work with Most Def. He's it's the same camp, right? So and we're just sharing information as far as how to produce, and the opportunity came up. I think they were signed, what was that? Was it Quest? It was Warner. It was a Warner Brother label, whatever it was, and Ian Alexander was their A&R. So we, ended up working with them, and that's actually how I met Most too, through through that project because Most was friends with Khalil, and he brought him in to do the intro outro on the Gravity album.
So, what was those conversations like with Most as far as working in the future together?
Yeah, well, Khalil is doesn't get a lot of, and when I realized this, I always try to like give him like big props because he was a conduit to two major things that the most unless it's told you don't know. So introduced me to Most, but he even after I worked with Most on the Gravity album, he came to the studio. We were at Battery Studios. Um, Khalil brought him to my house to listen. So that was the difference. Me meeting him at the studio had a beat that they had already picked. He just did what he did, but when he brought him to my house, and that's when I start playing him like. if well, if you hung, you could hear. Yeah, I think I played for him the Universal Magnetic song, and eventually, we just start working together, right? So Khalil was the connection for that, and come to find out, also Khalil was the connection for Black Star, right? Because Khalil was friends with Kweli, and Khalil was friends with Dante on most, and he introduced them, and they in turn formed a group, so he was a conduit to a couple of relationships that manifested itself with work, music coming out and stuff.
Remember most about working with Black Star?
um with Black Star, we went. I remember it was the four of us, because I was already Moses' producer through rock, through Phone You Could Hear and the Body Rock. No, actually Body Rock didn't come out. We hadn't worked on that yet, but they flew us to California because most was in, like, doing television of some sort. So he was already out there. So the label flew. So Talib and I, Talib or Quali, however you go. We flew out to on Tower Air, like the defunct airlines. Like, it's just some one flight a day kind of. We flew out there and met Most, and then High Tech. They flew High Tech out from Cincinnati, and then we were working in a friend of ours, Kendra. Her uncle had like a studio in L.A. in his house. Like, it was nice studio, but we did it, and so that I remember that experience, because that's really the only time we were really brought together, the four. Because then if you look at the album cover, you'll see Most, and like a caricature of Most and Talib, and then underneath it you'll see like a little small picture. Someone pointed this out. I never knew this until like a couple of years ago. Like, see a little small caricature of me and a little small caricature of High Tech. And thanks, shout out to Tim Rowan, who worked at the Rockers label. He helped to bring that about, and working with the artist that did it. So to me, that was a big moment, because we were the original four, and then it branched off into the J Rawls, and all the different folks, amazing producers that were on the Geology, stuff like that. So
Right. You mentioned the Body Rock. What was that session like working with Q-Tip and Tash and Most Def?
man, now like, if it, like, this is Q-Tip, like, and within native tongue you have different, like, I'm a triber, right? Like I love De La stuff for sure. De La was actually the one I got introduced to. That introduced me to the native tongue as a whole. So potholes in my lawn, but like when I heard Tribe, that I resonated with the production more, like all the different things, right? So to be in the studio with Q-Tip, we were at Firehouse Studios, and I'm like, we're in there, and he was definitely up there as far as in his notoriety and everything. So we come to the session, um, working with the engineer, getting the stuff up. Eventually, he comes there, it's superstar status, like, type stuff. Like, comes in, like, but cool, right? And he came in, and Most is interacting with him and stuff, because they were hitting it off even before, that it was still recent, but they had connected. And when he came in, Most did his stuff, and I remember he did his verse, and in the beginning he says something about so why some, and when he said that, I was like, and I said to Most, I was like, oh, what, I call him Dante, because I don't actually call him Most or Yasin. It's like Dante, but Yasin is his name now. So Dante, he would I said, man, did he said why? And the reason why that's important is because in the beginning of Universal Magnetic, I was always a big fan of taking actual instruments or whatever, but also organic things like voices, and like with my little recorder or whatever. So Moses, his son Elijah, was young, and we asked him a question, and he said something on there, and you could hear him in the background, like, why? Like, he would why? And I put that in. So this is in the super very beginning of Universal Magnetic. But when Q-Tip went in the booth, and then he says that, like, he listened that deeply to that song, like, he just picked that up. It's because it's super, it could go right past you, but I was so impressed, like, wow, this guy, as large, of a presence as he is, talent and notoriety, all this stuff, he's a music lover, right? And he pays attention to nuances because that is a total nuance in that track. So that's one of the things I remember from the session, because it was like, oh wow, man, it was almost like a validation, like wow, like, oh, you hear me, like, you hear me even on the nuance stuff.
Right.
So it was dope.
Very dope story.